have more experience in the labor movement than I have years being alive. So not everything might be directly pointed at you, but hopefully we can have a panel that is relevant to everybody. And I really look forward to hearing what everybody has to say when we shift into the audience questions. But welcome everybody. My name is Hurd. I'm one of the co-chairs of DSA's National Labor Commission. Also called the NLC, also called DSA Labor. We go by many names. And I just wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit for our panel by saying over the past 6 years, I have personally seen a huge shift in DSA's approach to the labor movement, from it being kind of a hobby that some people had that you could do in a working group to really being one of the main thrusts of our work and our orientation as a full organization. We've rapidly expanded our capacities to support labor struggles, and have tried to provide space and infrastructure for some of the most talented organizers in the country to connect and transform their unions on a national level. We're going to hear a little bit about that from our panel members. DSA called its national program Workers Deserve More out of a recognition that putting the working class in motion is the key to winning our demands, and that an understanding that when we put our message in a way that is easy for people to understand, it's incredibly popular. EWOP, DSA's partnership with UE, has trained hundreds of workplace organizers. The NLC has distributed thousands of dollars in strike support funding for DSA chapters attempting to build relationships with local unions through material support. We've held regular calls providing political education and creating space for discussion. We launched our Labor for an Arms Embargo campaign to provide training to members who are trying to use the power of their unions to end the arms shipments to Israel. And there's much more work that we need to do to make the NLC a body that can connect rank and file militants across unions and across state lines, but we are, I think, really well positioned in this moment to make that happen. So the description of this panel frames our discussion as being about what the NLC has been up to, but I'd like to kind of expand our focus to be about the experience organizers on this panel have had as kind of the go-betweens between DSA and the unions that they're operating in. A conference like this isn't for just advertising all this cool stuff that we've done. It's a venue for interrogating our work and sharing ideas to help us build together. And I hope that in this panel and in the Q&A, we can get at some of the tensions and big questions that we've been facing. We're facing new frontiers as DSA cadre take on leadership positions in unions. And our organization is increasingly viewed as a valuable partner in important fights like the Federal Unionist Network fight to protect federal union jobs. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Connor Spence is the president of ALU-IBT Local 1. Shay, to my right, is a barista in Cleveland and a member of Starbucks Workers United, also on the steering committee. And at the far end, AK Alilonu is an organizer with the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee and also a member of the IDSA. So I will first toss it to Connor to just say a little bit of opening remarks about your experience as a socialist militant and now a leader in a very important union.
Sure. So it's good to see everybody. My name is Connor Spence. I'm the president of ALU-IBT Local 1, formerly Amazon Labor Union. I was one of the founding organizers of the campaign. We organized an Amazon fulfillment center called JFK 8 in Staten Island. At that time, a warehouse of 8,000 workers, and we became the first unionized Amazon fulfillment center in the U.S. However, three years later or so, Amazon is obviously refusing to come to the table, negotiate with the workers. We affiliated with the Teamsters in I think July of last year. And around that same time, we also had a leadership election, and our group was elected to lead the union. And my socialist politics is one of the reasons I started to organize. I worked for Amazon since 2017. I myself was pretty radicalized by the working conditions. And the more I dug into how do you fix the things that I'm experiencing, the more I researched, it was like the thing that came up over and over again was form a union. And at that time, like, also pretty radicalized by Bernie's campaign as well. So that's how I found my way into labor organizing. It was, you know, a very socialist entry into labor organizing. I was fortunate to be part of, you know, a campaign that was successful in what it set out to do, but then given where we are now, we realize that there's a lot more work to do, and some of the stuff that we thought we knew, we didn't really know. And we've had to go back to the drawing board and look at the lessons of, you know, the people who did this successfully before us, socialists, communists, and figure out how to reintroduce that kind of militancy into the labor movement through our organizing, do it in a way that's like radical and grassroots and democratic. Just to tie it back to DSA, I've been a paper member of DSA for a long time. That was not through because I wanted to be. It was more a matter of like the organizing Amazon took up basically every waking hour that I had. But we just went on strike in December, and the support that we got from DSA was like, I'm not even exaggerating, like we would have crumbled without that support. It would have looked completely different without DSA support. Both the people that the organization was able to mobilize and bring out to support us on the picket line, but also the support that we got as far as capacity. I think there's another question about this later, but being a Teamster local does not mean we have a ton of resources and support. And so that has inspired me to get more involved myself in DSA, because I've seen how these two things, the labor organizing and getting more involved in the org, they support one another. And now a lot of our committee, a lot of our core are becoming DSA members themselves. So that support comes back to the organization. And so that's what I'm here to talk about.
Shay, I feel like you've had a somewhat similar experience through organizing at Starbucks. Can you speak a little bit to how you got into this whole thing?
Yeah, just kind of by way of background, I'm in Shay, they them pronouns, grew up in Iowa, then moved to Cleveland, and had been involved in student organizing, political organizing, got to climate work, was lucky enough to have attended some trainings under the late great Larry Hanley, who was organizing transit workers to be working in Staten Island with transit riders to win contract demands. And I had been lucky enough to work for ATU as staff in, say 2018, but on a campaign, but had never been involved as a rank and file worker in organizing. Had worked for a pretty major nonprofit in the climate space, and been fired while organizing union. And I think that was, and having DSA folks have my back in that moment in a really meaningful way was, I think, very, I think it grounded me in very much wanting to stay engaged in the labor movement, and also having an understanding of our climate work only being something that we can deliver with organized worker power through the labor movement. And so in 2021, I heard about some folks up in Buffalo getting together at Starbucks, and I'd been organizing under Workers United at the nonprofit that I had put an unfair labor practice in, and so that organizer actually called me up. He was looking for salts, and he's like, "Hey, have you heard about Starbucks?" I was like, "Yes." And have you heard about? And specifically, he's like, "Well, there's an organizing committee at this place in Cleveland, and it happened to be my alma mater." And it's like, "Yeah, I'm there." And I met with one of the fellow members of our organizing committee, who happened to several of our, I think there's 5 folks in the organizing committee when I got into the store were paper members of DSA at that point. And so it was folks who were looking for guidance on how do we unionize, and I was like, I've gotten cards before, but that's as far as I've gone. But I need y'all to help me keep this job like when we're like getting slammed during peak and I'm a newbie on, you know, on the bar. And so, yeah, we'll speak to a little bit more about it, but that's kind of got in.
AK, what brought you into the labor movement?
What brought me into the labor movement? Hey there, folks. My name is AK Alilonu. I am, as I said, on the steering committee for Chicago DSA. I'm one of the coordinators. I'm an organizer with the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, EWOP. I'm also a coordinator with the local affiliate of EWOP here in Chicago, the Chicago Workplace Organizing Committee, SHIWOP. Very, very cool. I also, as my day job, I do legal work with the fighting nurses of the Illinois Nurses Association. And before I did any of that stuff, I worked in a small office about 10 blocks down the street from here on 35th, working for my city councilwoman's office. And the reason that I took that job is because I saw that there are a lot of problems in my community on the south side. And I wanted to make those problems better. I wanted to fix that stuff. And the reason that I left that job is because I was not able to do that. And that's because none of us is able to do that, at least on our own. It takes organized communities to fight poverty. It takes organized communities to fight gun violence. It takes organized communities to fight substandard housing. It takes organized communities to fight these deportations. And what that organizing means is being able to go to folks and say, hey, you've got a lot of problems. I think you can fix those problems, and I can help you do that. And that is the very important work of DSA, of the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, and that should be the work of our entire movement, and that's what I'd like to talk about today.
Thanks, AK. I'm actually going to throw it actually right back to you. So you mentioned that your day job is providing legal support through the Illinois Nurses Association to healthcare workers who are trying to fight the boss. Can you talk a little bit about how it feels to be doing that as your day job while also in your free time you are bringing these new and excited people into the labor movement when you know that some of the realities of being in a union and trying to get support when increasingly like the legal situation is set against us, these apparatuses are getting dismantled. How do you kind of balance that and the limitations of what we're able to do at our current level of strength and organization?
You asked me how it feels. It feels good because it is what we need to do. Not a lot of folks are doing it. It feels bad because not a lot of people are doing it. So right now, right, our labor movement is pretty weak, and we would like it to be strong. And I was thinking about how do I analogize this? If you got a guy or a woman, they don't, who is weak, who's only lifting those little 2-pound dumbbells, and this person says, I want to get strong. I want to be able to bench 500 pounds, right? You don't just get up one day and do that. You have to have a strategy. You have to say, I want to be able to lift 15 pounds this day, I want to be able to lift 50 pounds this day, I want to be able to lift 100 pounds this day, and then I will get towards my goal. For the labor movement, we're all socialists here, right? So we have a goal where we want to put the working class in the driver's seat of this economy, of this country. And from that, it's kind of already evident that not only are we nowhere near that goal, not only are a lot of folks not even clear on what steps it would take to reach that goal, we have a lot of folks in our movement who they're not even aiming for that target, right? And so when it comes to, what does the labor movement need to do to get to where we want it to be? What does the labor movement need to do in order to get strong? That starts with us. It starts with all of us. We are part of the labor movement. We are implicated in the demands that it seeks. And the labor movement is weak because in a way we're all kind of weak right now, right? And no one knows us better then the capital class, and businesses and corporations. If you are a business owner, your job is to make this much in profit this year. You gotta make even more than that next year, make even more than that next year, and you have to eliminate every obstacle in your way that is preventing you from reaching that goal. And we kind of need to do the same, right? If you are a capitalist and you make $5 million this year and you make $5 million the next year, you're failing because you're not growing. So how can that be the case? And you're a socialist, and you see, a future where your goal is being the driver's seat along with the rest of the international working class, and you can't even talk to Tabitha from accounting, right? And so that's why I'm so glad, to be part of the work that DSA is doing, part of the work that NLC is doing, part of the work that the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee is doing, to make that strategy a reality and set clear targets for what we need to do in order to get to the kind of world that we want. And that's the work that I do and the work that I hope we all do as a movement.
Thank you, AK. Connor, I'm wondering if you've run into this with, getting your coworkers all excited about, like, we're gonna have a union, and now you're hitting these roadblocks when it comes to getting the boss to actually take bargaining seriously. What has that been like?
I mean, organizing Amazon, it's especially tough because it feels like a never-ending campaign. At JFK, for instance, we had to kind of reconcile with the analysis that our one where there's never going to be a contract with just one warehouse. Amazon, the second they make a concession in JFK 8, could be anything. They're going to have union elections overnight because we'll have validated that the process works, that organizing is good, and union elections, get results from Amazon. So they calculate the cost of our demands in JFK, they calculate it across the entire network. And so every demand has a national impact for them, or every concession has a national impact. And so you have to organize Amazon nationally, and that is a lot of work. There's several hundred fulfillment centers, several hundred sort centers, and way even more like delivery stations across the country. So there's this whole complicated thing where you have to look at the network and you have to look at the different choke points in the network, and we all debate over what they are and whatever. And then you have to communicate this to the workers who are just like, all right, so help me understand how we get from point A to point B, how we get from where we are now to a contract. Because if we just go to the workers and we say well, this petition will be the next thing, and then this, let's do this election, and then let's do this strike, and keep doing all these things, and they don't see anything changing because they don't understand the bigger picture, the bigger context of the struggle, it is extremely demoralizing. It's extremely demobilizing. And at the very least, you have to be able to show workers that there is growth happening. I can give them this explanation of look, we're not an island. We need to, we exist in the context of this North American network. We need to organize nationally. Then I need to be able to point to other warehouses where you say, look, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this, which I can. But also the scale of what we need to, where we need to be and where we are now. It's, we still got a lot of work to do, and it's hard to convince workers that. To keep that hope and sustain the momentum. And the people who end up being stick around for the longest are the people who have that class consciousness that we've kind of inspired in them and educated, and that's why political education is so important for this project too.
Shay, you're in a similar situation with,
Could you shut the door? I can't
Sure.
hear.
The national contract and organizing has to kind of happen all across the country. Is there anything that Connor said that kind of resonated with you?
Absolutely. So Starbucks operates 9,000 corporate stores in the USA. We just got over 600, which in 4 years is exceeding private sector union density for what it's worth, or at least at parity. So we began bargaining last year We gone through pretty much our non-economics, and Connor and I were actually on the same call with DSA comrades from across the country when we were striking simultaneously before Christmas. And similarly, DSA chapters, because we have 600, at that time I think it was 550, but that's enough unionized stores that we are close to chapters, big and small, doesn't matter. And frankly, if you have any amount of DSA members, you're probably close-ish to a Starbucks. Not necessarily a union one, but like we've got union stores in Louisville, we've got union stores in Iowa, we've got union stores in Oklahoma. So like you're not talking about just our major metros out here. And I know, just to talk a little bit about what the fight's been like, it's like, yeah, having to keep morale up while it's been this year, and honestly, when we rejected the company's garbage economic proposal in April, and that was a vote about, I think it was 81% no. And so having to take that and translate it, that's from elected bargaining delegates, but having to really translate that to all of our coworkers on the floor, who are absolutely still getting, right now the company's even trying to work back off of stuff that we actually TA'd and been doing unfair labor practices that way. And so I had a conversation with a coworker this month who was like, it's not happening. It was just having to, I think, there's certain folks who are like, I'm gonna be here at Starbucks for, while I'm finishing school or while I'm finishing, doing X, Y, and Z. I think it's about having a sense of where that worker's plan is, and like Connor's mentioning, understanding what their buy-in is, of what's their class consciousness enough to, at least while they're at Starbucks, before we make, they make the great escape, I call it. It's for them to, be willing to do marches on the boss, do work stoppages, do walkouts, vote yes on a strike vote, talk to our coworkers, help us build our solidarity fund. And so, not everyone's gonna be, like Michelle Eisen out here, who was with the company for 12 years before unionizing in Buffalo. But we're building each one as we can, and for the longer we have that time together, I think you're seeing folks who are gonna leave and still be ready to organize unions in their next jobs, because they know that there's never a point where they're never gonna not need a union at their workplace.
Yeah, and that class consciousness you can't go back. It's
Right.
like, once it's been awakened, it doesn't just go away when you leave the job. Can you speak a little bit more to like what solidarity work that like DSA chapters have done for your Starbucks location, for others?
So from the jump, I mentioned I gotten hired, it was December 21. One of my comrades who I'd worked quite closely with, since the uprisings in 2020, I didn't take more than, honestly, 2 asks. It's like, do you want to come salt at Starbucks? And it was like, yeah. She was hired by January. When we filed, our count was left roughly 16-6, and then a bunch of folks abstaining. In the 5 months in between, our chapter was huge in turning up for stipends. So that just means like showing up, your chapter, your comrades getting into the lobby, maybe ordering something, maybe just a water, tipping generously and chatting with workers should there be a break, and just getting good vibes. We had 5 months of union busting between filing and our election. I mentioned we were at roughly 16-6. When we voted, it was 11-9. We had active, some people have called it peppers. We had people who were being hired by our boss as friends just to vote no on the union election. And so 11-9, I only mentioned that also because we had 2 DSA members salting, and we were the DSA difference. And so, you can be too. That's just from experience. Solidarity's Brewing was also happening from the National Labor Commission, which was nationwide efforts by DSA chapters to show up, do sit-ins, do this kind of fundraising for solidarity funds. Our chapter had done both punk concerts and shows and drag shows. Our solidarity fund kind of stands out for some of the regional organizing committees, but our chapter raised the majority of our $28,000 over the last 4 years that we've gotten to, especially single moms, working parents, folks who've had their hours cut, folks who've been legally fired primarily, and other folks in hardship or for strike solidarity funds. So without our chapter, I don't think we would be where we are, and so just a shout out to all the DSA comrades.
Has there been any strike solidarity or general union solidarity from your local DSA that has really stood out to you?
Well, yeah, our strike, like I said, the support we got was so crucial, and even mobilizing the community, mobilizing members to come out to the picket line, it meant a lot for workers, because our workers were walking off the job at midnight on December 20th or something, and there was 2 buses full of people there, on the line already, waiting for them, cheering them on as they walked out the door. So that was really good. We don't have a lot, so even the chapter lent us some tools to help us with our text banking and our outreach and our supported our organizing in the time leading up. These are things we didn't have or we couldn't really afford on our own. So yeah, the way that DSA showed up to help us build out our capacity at that time when we didn't have it, that was crucial.
Hey, Kay, do you have any DSA solidarity kind of actions that you want to shout out, maybe that Chicago has done or that you've seen for EWOP organizing projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think having CDSA involved with EWOP work in general, but also the support that we got bringing EWOP to Chicago, having a Chicago local for EWOP. A lot of that came from DSA. A lot of our initial organizers helping workers out came from DSA. A lot of the new folks we get are DSA. In just a few weeks, our kind of inaugural class of Chicagoans who live and work here, who are part of DSA, who want to help their community members and neighbors organize, is going to be trained, and they're going to start taking cases from workers in Chicago who we're getting every week, who are saying, hey, I heard about what you guys are doing. I want to organize my workplace. And we wouldn't be able to do that without the infrastructure, without the support that we have from DSA folks who want to make the city a better place for workers.
Thanks. All right, back to you, Connor. How did your socialist political beliefs impact your organizing, and specifically your willingness to challenge the very charismatic leader of your union? For people who maybe aren't up to date, Chris Smalls was kind of put forward as the face of ALU, and you said, I'm willing to go up against this very kind of big personality guy. I'm just curious how does that relate to your politics and your kind of vision of what a union should look like?
So I think we have a type of unionism that we want to aspire to, which is to be radically democratic, worker-led. So there's certain things that we've since really codified in our bylaws that we believe are necessary. And we borrow a lot from UE. So our officers, their wages are pegged to the average wage of the worker, for instance. Open bargaining is something we've codified in our bylaws. It's, we have these measures that we want to put in place to make sure we don't lose that character of our union. I think going back to post-election, if you guys have heard me speak on the panel, you probably heard me say this a few times, we didn't really win our election by organizing, and that's like, people don't like to hear that, but it's true. We almost approached it like a political process, and what happened was, for the workers, it was very much a referendum, like on Amazon. You know, who do you hate more, Amazon or the union? And thankfully, more people hated Amazon. But to say that we came out of that election with a real structure, with workers being organized, something that we could mobilize in the direction of like putting actual pressure on the company, we did not have that. We've been paying for it ever since, and we've been obviously trying to rebuild that ever since, or build it to begin with, because our analysis, and it was a very liberal analysis at the time, we didn't realize it, even though I was a socialist, I was not as developed as I am now, where we put faith in the NLRB, in the government agencies, in the Department of Labor, that we would win this election and they would make Amazon come to daylight. I don't think we had any idea of like why Amazon would concede to such a disorganized workforce, but we just thought we'd figure it out. And one of the reasons I had to run for this position is like our leadership was not interested in organizing workers to go on strike, and that had to change. And thankfully that has changed, and we're doing it little by little. The strike we just went on was very much a minority strike, but the impact it had at being a proof of concept for our Amazon workers and showing like, no, it is possible that workers can walk off the job and take a stand and come back to work, and live to fight another day. That was a big thing. So with that foundation, now we're working on building that out bigger and bigger. But like I said, it's got to be done on a much larger scale than just our one little warehouse in Staten Island. Not that it's little; it's the highest volume warehouse in Amazon's network. But it's still just. No, I mean that's good because it's like, all right, we've already got one of the biggest fish, but it's like it's a big ocean. And so that was another thing, is like being able to approach our operation in a way that was scalable. And we had taken this very, like after the election, taken this very service model approach, which we didn't even have the resources to offer services, so I didn't know why we were doing it. But we had to, there was just not a real sense of like what organizing was, because we did not really look back at, like I said, the fundamentals of like the people who built this movement, the organizers who built this movement, like what it is they actually did and believed in, and we got to look back at that.
Hey, Kara, Shay, did that awaken anything in you that you want to speak to? Go ahead.
I think it was last year. For years I was terrified, deathly afraid of opening no shortcuts, because I was just like, I am a walking shortcut. I think it was last year when it was announced that Jane was going into hospice, and I was like, I'm fucking gotta open it. And the first line being, you don't do any, like in the notes to an organizer, is don't do anything for a member that they can do for themselves. Just shut it immediately, and it was just freaking out for a good week. But continuing on, there was also like some reminders that we had been doing good organizing in moments, but a lot of the beginning, a lot of the catching fire moment, certainly for this campaign, was like, let 1,000 salts bloom. It was scattershot. We found some really credible people, but there wasn't a structure that was ready. And we could see this once we even got to bargaining. We were almost surprised ourselves that it happened, and figuring out how to even do this together. Every store is a bargaining delegate, as I mentioned. Some folks were in person, but it was essentially a hybrid, so it's opening bargaining. And for folks who primarily never done this before. So a lot of it was having to learn, understand, and I think that was where it was really important as socialists amongst, and we didn't all even have a sense of who were other DSA people in the bargaining committee or other socialists, but after a couple of sessions, it kind of became pretty quickly clear. You work on a no strike, no lockout clause, and you get a sense of where people are at. But you have to build that political education up as early as possible, and it feels clunky because you're trying to get through like the day-to-day of working our shop, let alone like connecting with other bargaining delegates and doing that organizing work. But it's invaluable, just period.
Yeah. Earlier I talked about management, bosses, corporations, have a strategy to make sure that we lose and they win, right? And one of those strategies is that they get a lot of power. They use that power to change the rules a little bit. They use that rule change to get even more power, and they change the rules a little bit more. And I can say this because I'm not a lawyer yet, but part of that strategy is, the laws, the legal system that we work under. It is designed for us to lose. And a strategy where we don't lose, where we win, has to involve us gaining power, using that power to change the rules, so it's easier for us to gain power to then change the rules so we can win. And so relying on the NLRB, on the DOL, for the reason that I just stated, is a strategy that our movement has to move beyond in order to win. And the only way we get that power is through organizing, by doing the very good work that these folks are doing, the work that DSA is helping to support, to make sure we have the power that we need to succeed.
Connor, I've got another one for you. So ALU was an independent union. It then affiliated with the Teamsters, which are famously a very big, very strong, very powerful union. How has that experience affected your organizing, if it has at all, and how do you kind of see that relationship kind of developing moving forward?
Yeah, the problem with, one of the problems with being independent was this, struggle that we ran into where it's like, we just picked a fight with the biggest company, period. And in order to have the leverage we need to get them to come to the table, let alone make any concessions, like we need to be operating on a national scale. And there was a lot of similar independent efforts, but one by one, I think everybody, hits a wall and then has a conversation with, the IBT about like joining their program and getting some support, some resources. Like, we're all just human beings. Everybody who's organized their workplace knows how quickly you can burn out doing this work. And Amazon's business model is designed to make that possible. It's like, not only is the work itself hard, the average turnover per year is 150%. Like, one of the things that was good about Amazon organizing and bad is like, talk to all these people. And at first, like, I could have terrible, like, it was good practice. I had terrible conversations at first, and I was like, I didn't feel embarrassed or anything because they'd be gone. Like a month. But then it's really hard to sustain an organizing committee in that environment. And part of like how the capitalists keep us down is like they spread us so thin in our lives, and they make it so that like every day, you're exhausted and you're struggling, and you have such little energy to really put into a fight. And then one little thing happens. You have a great leader who's, helping grow the committee, and then, someone in their family gets sick, or they have a kid or so, and then they're gone. And so, these are the struggles of being, independent, not having a lot of resources, and then needing to organize on a national scale. So it makes sense then, and this is what we did, we affiliated with the Teamsters. Now we're part of the National Amazon Organizing Division, and the strike that we just did, we were one of like 7 or 8 facilities across the country that also participated in that strike. And that's important for the workers to see for the reasons I just mentioned. If you're gonna tell them, we don't have enough leverage here by ourselves to bring Amazon to the table, then you need to be able to say, but look, we're working on it, and we're, warehouses all over the country and organizing committees all over the country are growing and taking action, and we will get there. But the other thing that you run into is that Amazon is so big, and maybe like even the Teamsters are spread thin, basically. And it's really, really tough for any single union in the country to take on Amazon. And so what a lot of people have said, I'm a big proponent of this, is making Amazon a project of the labor movement, of the working class, because number one, Amazon sets the standard of work and the future of work and impacts unions in every industry. They're also in every industry now. They're, you know, obviously logistics, tech, they're moving into healthcare, they're doing all this stuff. And so I think if we're really to grow the movement to the size that it needs to be in a time frame that's not like makes workers feel like it's a never-ending fight, that's what I believe needs to happen. And you know, DSA having that support is like it's one of those coalition members that absolutely needs to be there.
Yeah, and just to do a little self-plug, our Workers Organizing Workers program has made Amazon a priority. We're casting just a big net, trying to get as many people in as possible to, like, yeah, to aid the fight, because it is everybody's, it's gonna be everybody's problem. They're coming for all of us. I just have one final question, and then I'm so excited to hear what the group has to ask. But Shay, what do you think the most important tasks of socialists in the labor movement will be in the coming years, and what can DSA do to better support efforts to put that into action?
Yeah, I don't think 5 years ago I would have been able to, I would have answered like, make a fucking frappuccino. Make a frappuccino, comrade. But whether it's like moving like literally all of the goods that I see, you know, delivered to, you know, all my neighbors and their apartment, you know, that are going through the warehouses that Connor's talking about, or that UPS Teamsters are bringing over, or that, you know, the union coffee that we're making, the ability to normalize and grow the sense that every worker deserves a union. In my first month getting the like, what I think the moment that I felt so blown away was like, you know, half my coworkers, I'm 38, half my coworkers are literally half my age. And so like, you know, getting into a combo with a 19-year-old who's like, doesn't talk at all, like, does like all the great work on the floor, but just like, you know, we're on an organizing committee call and he's like, I'm like, Evan, why are you here? He's like, I think every worker deserves a union. That's it, that's all I said. Like, we have to mobilize to every one of those impulses. Those are the workers that we have a chance and who are going to not only show up as militant organized workers, but they're the ones who are gonna be able to then turn themselves into organizers. It's not gonna be you who's turning into an organizer. You just have to be at the side, letting them know that they have a comrade that's, you know, worthy of taking a risk with. That's worthy of taking a risk that you may lose, and there's a very good chance you lose and you get fucked over, but that like at the end of it, you're gonna have been stronger and you're better armed for the next struggle than you were right before you got started.
Connor, AK, do you guys have any thoughts on the most important tasks and what DSA can do?
Yeah. One, we need a fucking strategy, right?
It's called the rank and file strategy, AK.
We have a strategy. And, you know, part of what the rank and file strategy is kind of meant to do is, you know, acknowledge the fact that we want a world that is socialist. There are lots of people in this world, so only a few of us are socialists. We're very cool, but we need more of us, right? And we need organizing in order to make that happen. And, you know, what can someone who identifies as a socialist do to get us closer to that world? Talk to somebody, right? Organizing is all about taking folks who have issues, saying, hey, I can help you fix those issues, and I think you can also help you fix those issues. And so, when I am organizing a workplace, the first thing that I tell the workers is, hey, find someone else, find one of your coworkers who you talk to the least, and just have a conversation. It doesn't have to be about organizing, it's not gonna be about socialism, it probably shouldn't be about organizing or socialism. If you want to live in a world where you and the rest of the folks in the working class are in the driver's seat, you have to know those folks, and you have to be able to work with those folks and talk with those folks in order to get to a world where you and those folks are together fighting the boss. And that is what, we'll get there only if we do that, and that's what I would like socialists to do.
Thank you. Connor, important task. How can we help?
So I think that, it all goes together, like the organizing that we are doing in our local, the political education we're trying to do, it's all for the purpose of awakening that class consciousness in workers, getting them to take action. I think organizing, fundamentally what you gotta do is, all I know is labor organizing. I don't really know I haven't done many types of other organizing, but I know that the best thing that you can do in organizing is try to focus where the contradictions of capitalism hit people the hardest. And that, for me, that is in the workplace. Every day, they're experiencing, their employer trying to extract as much profit out of them as possible. And when you have an organizing conversation, you try to address a worker's issue, you try to help them understand that issue that you're having is an intentional creation of management because they're trying to extract profit out of you. Without even having a conversation about Karl Marx or anything else, you've helped them understand the idea of that there are two classes at play here. And from there you can do a lot, and you can really get people agitated and organized into a structure and then mobilize that structure. So I think that is why, obviously, like I said, I'm a labor guy, so obviously I'm gonna say, please support labor organizing, I think, but it's important for those reasons. But I also think we can take those principles into other areas of our community. My goal, my dream is to help build the Staten Island DSA branch, which has used to be bigger, I've heard, it's not so much anymore. And I want to change that, and Staten Island is a very conservative borough, at least compared to the other boroughs in New York City, but 10,000 people in Staten Island just came out and voted for Zoran. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity there, and so, I want, as DSA supports our organizing, I want our workers who are part of that community to go back and fight for the issues that aren't necessarily tied to the workplace, but they, building a mass movement in Staten Island, New York City, that we can resolve those things and help them understand that it's all one struggle.
Thanks, guys. Okay, we are now opening it up to audience questions. So I see in the very, very back. Go ahead.
Labor organizing is very hard, and oftentimes when you get good at it, you get sort of really involved with your union, and you have less time to spend on DSA in lots of ways. And this is compared to Toro, where you can start as a canvasser to field lead. There's a nice clean ramp, onboarding ramp or whatever, and labor doesn't really have that, or it goes in different directions. It goes into the union instead of into DSA. How can we as DSA continue to develop new labor leaders, new socialist labor leaders that expands our capacity to continue to support the worker movement?
This is a great question, and either Shay is the best person in the world to answer this, or the worst. Shay is trying to be on the bargaining committee, on the national leadership, on the local leadership. I'm still going to give you a chance to answer.
Still trying, yeah. I felt like the one thing I would do in general is encourage all your union members to join the NLC. It is our labor body. It is something that prior to my joining just as a rank and file member, I felt was mystified, over mystified, and was this place where you had to come in as a veteran labor organizer, and it's we're workers. If you're organizing your workplace, you should probably get best practices from folks that you could get those resources from. So if you're organizing a workplace, if you're like thinking about it, those are people who you should be saying, hey, join the NLC. I think from there it's like, or you know, when we did Solidarity's Brewing at the national level, I think that was when I joined NLC, but not as on the like steering. But that was just how I like got to see one of our Starbucks workers like on the same call as Tom Morello. Like you just get to be hyped for a second because there's good work in the body. And like that led to resolutions that chapters were doing. Right now, you know, if your chapter hasn't already put out have a solidarity captain, we have a resolution that you can pass in your chapter so that you can find the people who are, maybe they're not union workers, but they're the ones who are gonna help turn out like at JFK 8 and be there at midnight when workers are hitting the picket line.
And so you can access our huge pile of money that we
Yes,
have
please,
for
take
chapters
our
of
money.
solidarity work.
Because like this is some of the best work that DSA actually does. Like our chapter was very nascent 2017, but we showed up in force for, I think we had members who were in the school. It was a charter school, the fourth charter school that unionized in the country. We had folks who were on staff with the Ohio Federation of Teachers. We had folks who were who were a gym teacher at that school, and we had folks who were going to show up and bring their parents out to the picket line in a typically like whiter suburb that, you know, is more conservative, like Staten Island, you know, but like no, people come out. I think those are really important functions that we have to lean into as DSA members, help encourage that, even if we're big in our union, for our lay, you know, friends who are not yet union.
Yeah, well, and I would just want to piggyback and say that sometimes it's okay to not be as actively involved in your DSA chapter while you're doing your union work, Shay. But like, I don't know, I heard a story about somebody, I think this was Kareem from New York City, saying that he had talked to somebody who was like a district captain for Zoran, who was like, oh, I'm not super actively involved in DSA, I'm just working on the Zoran campaign. And he was like, then you're active in the work of DSA. I think it's similar with labor, where it's like, if you're contributing to the project in a way that doesn't mean you're the chair of XYZ committee, that's legit, like that's fine. And we're all going to be kind of cycling in and out of these different roles through like the different chapters of our organizing lives.
So I take it back, I was not a paper member, I was an active member.
That's I think I saw Ryan raised.
Yeah, so I'm on the steering committee for Omaha DSA, and we're a new chapter. But for the past couple of years, one of the requests that I've been getting was for EWOP to be available in Spanish. So, but also I come back to them and I say, hey, if you have translating skills, please volunteer for EWOP. But also I've been wondering, since the ICE raids have been happening these past month or so, how has that been affecting labor organizing for Latinos?
How has the events of the past
Yeah,
few months been affecting labor organizing?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's made it clear that we need it now more than ever. I think that the folks who are dealing with, you know, the onslaught against their civil rights are looking for solutions in Chicago and in plenty of communities across this country. That'll make them stronger, make the communities more resilient and more able to resist this kind of shit from happening in the future, right? In Chicago, right now, actually, there are quite a few undocumented workers active in labor organizing on strike. Chicago DSA is supporting those workers. And the work of EWOP is going out to those workers, helping them, you know, find power in the workplace and translate that power through DSA into their communities. And so a lot of the work of Chicago EWOP, of EWOP as a whole, is finding these folks who are marginalized, kind of bringing them in. And for folks who want to help out, who speak Spanish, there are plenty of those folks in EWOP in general. And the more of them that we have in Chicago EWOP especially, the better able we will be to do that work.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, so kind of almost a little bit piggybacking off of Ryan's question. Sort of also taking into consideration someone like Lenin's critique of economism and the limitations of social democracy and reform, what strategies can be implemented to move workers and unions beyond, just union consciousness and make them actively militant against anti-fascist work, international anti-colonialism, abolition, and other very important aspects of the left that are in the working class's interests?
I'm talking too much, but this is pertinent to our union at least, because frankly, we wouldn't be bargaining if we had not had the support of a boycott movement that was directed at Starbucks. We didn't call for it particularly, but after our solidarity statement with Palestine on October 8th, that we were sued by the company, and then, kind of a cascading, like, I'm pretty sure Howard Schultz told folks that he was going to close every union Starbucks after we made our statement. The pressure that was mounted, that for what it's worth, our members through the rank and file, like, without having organized on this extensively, there was a lot of base level solidarity that are, like I said, we had like 5 paper members, or active members. We had 5 members who were in our organizing committee before we even talked to them. So there's certain workforces that you're gonna get that it's younger, queerer, and ready, but it's not a given that we're gonna make a statement or take action. But I think the ensuing solidarity that we saw was in trying to, for people who weren't even politicized yet, and they understood that, like, the amount of folks who were, as this horrors unfolded in Gaza, that they were receiving solidarity and support in ways that they didn't anticipate, even having been a Starbucks Workers United member. But like, the company made bargaining essentially something contingent on wanting to settle this lawsuit because they'd been getting so much flack for it. It's an anecdote, but it's been really important to where we are today.
And
I will also say, very quickly, that a lot of folks in the working class know that fascism is bad. What they lack is the kind of organizational structure that will allow them to fight it. Right. And the point of DSA, of our movement, of the labor movement in particular, is kind of bringing these folks in, addressing their immediate needs, and then helping them connect those needs to the bigger social, political project that we are all engaged in together. And that is the very important work that we are all doing here today.
Okay.
I will just, one more thing that I want to add is that I think that, it definitely doesn't happen in any way automatically, but when we live in such a kind of atomized and self-segregating society where people outside of work often don't have even a way of connecting with people of a different experience than them, but they do have, sometimes 8 to 12 hours a day that they're spending like in this place with other people. By building up those relationships where people are breaking out of their, particular like community or experience, I do think that's really a good starting point for kind of building out that sense of like, oh, we're actually all people, not just, all of us in the United States, but like globally as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to be more explicit in that aim. Like, I think that that there's a contradiction, or I appreciate the person's question in the front, but kind of the response has been, well, we let the capitalist class organize it for us. And like, I think the problem is actually we need a left in this country that actively organizes for an international working class revolution, and not to just say big words, but really what does that mean? It means we can't just we have to do the work to organize at workplaces, but that doesn't mean that we are the good foot soldiers for union bureaucracies that are absolutely tied with the Democratic Party, and which is completely in support of a genocide in Gaza, and that is also managing a capitalist system that is forced to strip working people of wealth and labor around the world and in the United States. So in our labor organizing, it has to be completely tied with our perspectives of how we build up rank and file and like on the job consciousness in workplaces where workers are discussing, yes, how is the problems at work tied with a capitalist system, that yes, we show up on the picket lines and this might be our first kind of exposure to the fact that we can do something, but our role as militants, our role as leftists is to help and push and help develop workers to see those ties together. And I think that the thing that I want to add to this conversation is that political realm of, okay, we're going to campaign for the Democrats. We can't leave that out of it can't be separated from like how we do workplace organizing, because doing the work for the trade union bureaucrats and the Democratic Party is going to stab us all in the back in the end.
We're gonna switch to taking a couple at a time so that we can try to get through as many as possible. So I see you over there, and then we'll go to you in the front.
Hey, I'm Rami. I'm the co-chair of the labor branch in my DSA chapter in the Twin Cities, and I've been in the EWOP union, although I'm switching soon to an ASMA union, but I'm in the Reform Revolution Caucus. I'm just kind of picking up on some of the threads of the conversation. I want to pick up what Aaron asked in the back about how do we build a labor movement and build DSA, and I really get the point about like, it's exhausting to do too many things, like, and it can be stressful and lead to burnout. But I also, like, I've been on my bargaining committee, and my union, which has actually a better union president than most unions, the union leadership is not really taking the fight to the boss in the way we should. And when I try to bring up ideas like striking or a march on the boss, it gets shut down by my union leadership, and who is wedded to the Democrats completely, and to add to what you were saying. And so I do think, I guess my question is, shouldn't we be, it's true, like if you're doing labor organizing, that is DSA work, but isn't it necessary to also build a socialist party? Because our unions right now are dominated by this labor bureaucracy that is in bed with the Democrats. It gets out the vote for the Democrats, spends all this money on the Democrats, and also doesn't really challenge the bosses and the Democrats and Republicans. Like, so we need, and like you were saying, Connor, like, to get the workers to take the fight to the boss, they need to develop a better understanding of like the overall system of capitalism and how we can challenge it. And so like inviting people to NLC meetings or DSA meetings, building DSA and building our labor movement, isn't it necessary for us to make time for both? Because otherwise, aren't we just letting the liberal pro-Democrat people run our labor movement into the ground like they've been doing for decades?
Okay, let's take this final question and then we'll see if we've got more responses from the panel.
Right. Yeah, I guess my question is like you guys talked about the rank and file strategy. Great, I feel like love to hear that. And and part of that is when you have a perspective that when union leadership, for instance, takes the right direction or does the right thing, you're kind of like the wind in their sails, like, yes, let's go, right? And then, but when they're taking the wrong step or doing something kind of not cool, you have the ability to act independently of that, right? So you're not always just antagonistic, but you're trying to like, how do we build the power to move the whole union over to taking good positions on this, that, or the other? So my question really is, or maybe not a question, but just if you could talk about it, is having that perspective also requires having tools to do that kind of perspective. And so thinking about like how you use something like a publication, right? So the classic in the 30s and 40s, and it was like, and 20s or whatever, socialists were using publications like newspapers or whatever that were designed not for socialists, but for regular workers to speak to shop floor issues. And that, in the 70s and stuff like that. And the reason why that's, I think, an effective tool is because it allows you to communicate your ideas about strategy, tactics, issues that are actually live and present on the shop floor and to kind of debunk bosses' myths or whatever. That doesn't necessarily have to be fucking newspaper, it's not what I'm saying. But like, how do you have like an independent way to kind of communicate those ideas and build a network? Because the publication can be kind of an organization. And publication, it could be social media, it could be, I don't know, like
Text chain.
yeah, text chain, WhatsApp, like little sheets of paper, whatever, fuck. But I guess, are those tools, is that like something that you're developing? And you know, I guess I see like things like Jacobin or in these times, they're cool, but they're not, that's not the same thing. You can't be like, read this fucking 6,000 word essay on, you know, this like Trotskyist Irish group or something. That's fucking weird out sound. So I was just like, is there stuff that like, how to use that tool to like speak to actual other workers and then give them the tools to organize, communicate ideas? Is that something you're thinking through or using? Or?
I do just want to shout out EWOP's meme curation. Like,
Absolutely.
I aspire, well, I don't personally, but I'm really glad that we're friends with them so that we can just show people their curated memes. I shudder a little bit to think that that's our version of like the newspaper. That feels
Can make
kind
me
of
shudder
weird.
more.
But
Because
go ahead,
like
yeah.
before it was, you know, like re-regulated, you know, there's TikTok for our union, right? It's like, this is we were spreading like wild TikTok.
What are you saying?
As a form of media that we were using to connect with workers across
It's like a
the
video
company. It's an online video. It's like a lot of quick hits video. I can't even describe it. I don't even have it. My phone's too old for it. Like I shot one video for the union, and then thank God someone edited it because I was like, but you know, I think we're seeing that immediately right now, especially the reaction to any form of media traction is being reacted to very quickly. But like for me, I also believe that it was a form of creativity that we took from our workers and made like while it lasted, very strong use of it and kind of harkening back to some old school methods.
And then I just really wanted to quickly, to Rami, to your point, I mean, I think that I might have misspoke when I said, you know, you don't have to be involved in everything. I think we should all continue to have our presence in different places, but I think something that I've seen a lot is if you get kind of pegged as a leadership type, then you end up somehow being in the leadership of all of these different organizations, and that just seems like a recipe for burnout. But I think having a presence there about the Democratic Party, I mean, I think we're all on the same page that we hate the Democratic Party. So like that feels like I feel confident putting that forward.
Talking for the Democratic Party.
What?
I mean, this is coming from like, and I'm speaking out of turn, but like, that this is like within the context of, we just saw a campaign that channeled people into the Democratic Party in New York from the DSA. So I'm not sure that we're on the same page about hating the Democratic Party, that's all.
Are you talking about the guy who just got elected as mayor of
If people can, let's Connor wanted to respond, and then I see you, Jason, with your question.
Yeah, I do want to respond to Rami. I share your perspective as well, and I'm actually someone who went from I did not have time to I'm gonna make time, because I see it as being important, and also because like what I believe, it's very difficult to go person by person. Some people are more amenable to our ideas. So on Staten Island, a lot of conservatives will like try to fight me if I talk to them about what I believe in. But I think like it's so good when you're in the workplace and you're just having a conversation about work and issues, and it opens the door to this whole realm of what our beliefs are. And then like that's why I've gotten like a good amount of our like core leaders now into DSA, because there are other struggles now on Staten Island in the city that I think we all need to be a part of. And when workers come into our union, it's like we dabble in these little areas. The Amazon division does not believe in NLRB elections, at least with the current leader, Randy Corgan. And the approach is more strike for recognition, which is like, good, is the right approach, is what's gonna get Amazon to the table. But if you're just, you know, if depending on the campaign, if I was organizing a campaign, I know now the NLRB sucks. I might still do an NLRB election, but for different reasons, because I see it as in organizing what we call a structure test. If we've built our structure and our organization to the point where something like an NLRB election is a trivial thing for our committee to just pull off, then that's good, but we just don't see it as the top of the mountain. Similarly, I don't see like getting a contract as the top of the mountain, because really for us, like our long-term goal is to build like mass worker organization and transition to a socialist society. If we get into this cycle of mobilizing and demobilizing every time the contract expires, that's not getting us anywhere. And that's why it's important that we are doing the political education and getting our workers into an org like DSA so they see the larger struggle.
So maybe Jason and then David, I saw you.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a partisan case for the printed internal bulletin on the shop floor. UAW, ALAA, like local, I forgot the local number, but the one out in New York City. They have a phenomenal one. The ALA organizer tells folks like all the different information going on in different shops. And it really galvanizes the folks, and it is a good way to help develop structure. When you have to set up a whole structure to hand out paper newspapers or internal bulletins to your coworkers, it's a really powerful tool. And they usually have strikes with 90% strike support and with support of like the actual folks that they represent in court, things like that. So just throwing that out there.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just kind of responding to Aaron in a certain way. It's like, this is not a new problem. Like, where our country, like a lot of English-speaking countries, the labor movement and this workers' parties develop separately. That's not everywhere, and this is like a continuing issue. Why it's easier, as you said, to get into electoral campaigns because then you can get a job, do the Socialist office committee, and you can't do that in labor. I mean, I think.
Yes, you can.
But I think, let me finish with it. So it's like, so for me as a trade unionist, like DSA is important for me, but in a different way. And I think this is what I'm interested in how you guys respond. Like, my union is very apolitical. So actually, the electoral politics doesn't even affect us. Like, they don't do anything. My union does nothing. But DSA is incredibly important because it's the only network that I'm one of the few people who's connected to the broader labor movement, because it's not an AFL-CIO union, so I can like bring up fun stuff, which is the Federal Unionist Network, because we're a public sector union. So there's this like whole network that I'm connected to through DSA, through the labor working group in New York and stuff like that. And I think that's a really important thing for us to like, not like get so upset about, because I think it's actually incredibly valuable. There's so many trade unionists who like live in a bubble. They go to work. And even if they're good people, it's like that they don't have this broader vision. And so I think that I think there's two things I would end on. So one is like, I think there are ways to merge our electoral and labor work. Like we saw in New York, and we've seen like getting people to actually try and influence their union's endorsement process. We can fight about that, but I think there are ways to merge that. But also the political education is key. It's like my union, our members were getting these like quit the union, but they were like for the wrong union. It was like telling us to quit ASME. So we did it about Janus. And we did political education about Janus. We brought in people like who were around DSA. But workers had no concept of what was the political movement to create Janus. And so I think this is like important work that like DSA is very valuable for someone like me to bring resources to my members, my brothers and sisters and siblings. And I think it's like, let's not kind of shit on it because it's not perfect. I think it's
Michaela, and then we'll see if the panel has any responses.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to hear what examples of the ways in which that they do political education. I'm the chair of political education in the national organization of DSA, and this is, we're having a panel, 10 a.m. tomorrow. So anyway, this phrase has come up a lot, and one thing that really interests me as someone who's doing this work at DSA and has also done joint projects with NLC, for example, the mass reading group that was international for We Are the Union, which had hundreds of readers. My interest here is also this distinction potentially between socialist education and worker education, and the ways in which radicalizing people to recognize the ways in which capital is exploiting and oppressing them itself is a form of political education, that it takes a socialist who's doing the rank and file strategy within the union to be able to spot and take advantage of. And that is the way in which people, it takes a while sometimes, it's not always oh, instantly I believe I'm a socialist, but I can say from my own experience, organizing my union turned me from a mildly interested in politics person to a person who realized that I needed to get organized as a socialist as well as a worker. So when you guys say political education, I want to hear examples, because what David said about the contract fight, that's also a mobilizing kind of thing, but then it's also like being able to have people ask questions like, why is it that we have to do it like this, can also be a moment of for a socialist within the work on the shop floor to be like, yeah, it sucks, which means that we also have to try to expand our imagination of what this can be, because the capitalist is going to try to shrink it or something like that. So I'd just love to hear from folks about concrete examples, and also for you, like, what does it mean to do that political education with your worker comrades?
Yeah, I'll start off. To be real, a big part of it's trying to figure out what it means to, how to do a conversation right if we're going on strike. First of all, educating myself, right? I've got coworkers in my shop who are, again, single moms. I've got folks who could give a fuck about the union, frankly, but we have a relationship from me being able to pick up their shift or do something that I can at least have a convo. The baseline is right now, literally, is I'll support you guys from inside when you're picketing on strike. And having to be that's not actually support. That means you're crossing the picket line. That means it's not helpful. What do we have to do for you to stay home and stay with your kids? That's the conversation. And it's the build up to, so we don't have pamphlets about it, because frankly, a lot of people glaze over if they're thinking you're going on try hard, advocacy. They don't give a fuck. They want to talk. They're I'm here to work, and that's I get, being forward as a socialist, but I always feel when did that not mean that we have to meet people where they're at? Yeah. At any point, right? If that person crosses the picket line, we all of a sudden go from having a total, complete strike participation to none. It breaks down. Because no one's gonna leave that shift manager on by themselves. I had a conversation with this. They self-described anarchists. And they're what happened to beating up scabs? I'm I'm down. Also, don't talk about violence against these single moms. Then you want me to have to do that, right? I'm very glad that you can talk about that as a concept that should be done. It's very comfortable for you. But when it comes down to it, what is, and taking any of those moments to build off of them, because other people hear those combos too, and they're why is this, what's the deal? I got high schoolers who come in who are we were told that there's nothing lower than a scab. And I'm good, I'm glad. Also, if you come at the person who's potentially crossing the picket line like that, you're going to break everything that we're building right now, because we have a shop of 15 people. So it's important, and I'm using anecdotes because it's abstract when these come up, because it's not we get a chance when we're getting slammed, just to be well, apart from we're not getting paid enough for this shit, we make an hour's worth of our salary in 2 minutes. Or paychecks. But I've ranted a lot, so I'm gonna cut it.
Yeah, I also wanted to.
Pardon, just point of personal privilege, because I really want to hear the panels. Can we stop the crosstalk? Because it's been like that for 20 minutes. I'd really like to hear them. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to second meeting people where they're at. On Staten Island, conservative, we have to build coalition with leaders in the warehouse who are conservative, and this doesn't happen in a day where we are able to, completely bring people to where we want them to be. And so like sometimes it takes a delicate approach, but what's good about like to your point of like how do we do political education? Like there's classical methods of giving people readings and doing workshops, but I think the way I've always looked at it is try to have it permeate literally everything that we do, from like their first training is like, like I said, this conversation about how to have an organizing conversation is really like a little introduction to building class consciousness with anybody. You can take anything that we do, like for instance, we're gonna file a charge with the NLRB. It's gonna take 2 years for this to be resolved, by the way. It doesn't matter who's in office. Why is that? Let's have that conversation. Or, this thing used to be a violation. We used to be able to file a charge, but now we can't under Trump. We don't do that anymore. Let's have that conversation. We do some things where it's like, yeah, there's some legislation in Albany that, would help us, so we try to support it, and we bring workers out. But that whole time we're having the conversation about, okay, well, here's where the bill came from, here's what it was watered down to, here's who's against it, etc. And especially if you're conservative, it's always the Republicans who are against the very basic, make your warehouse not 95 degrees, the most humane shit they're against. So it's like, use these as opportunities, in these that we know are probably not going to work out anyway, but then you can use it as a way to open the door to having a conversation about this is clearly not a good way for us to create change. What is a good way? And so yeah.
I'm gonna see, Olivia, did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to a couple things that were raised. I think, your question about how should DSA members approach being a union, being active in DSA. I think other people have said this already, but that is being active in DSA, is being a union, and we've seen that play out in Portland. We have DSA members. I'm a co-chair of Portland DSA, by the way, and one of my former co-chairs is now in executive leadership of the Portland Association of Teachers. We just went on a historic 3-week strike, and she's fulfilling her duty to DSA by being in leadership of that union and helping to organize that strike and move her members along with her. We also just had a historic healthcare workers strike, the biggest strike in Oregon history, where nurses and doctors went out, 4,000 nurses and doctors. I think it was the first time ever that doctors unionized with this nurses union and went out on strike. And DSA members were a huge part of that. And I emceed their rally, and there was a sea of Palestine flags and keffiyehs at this nurses union rally. And that didn't happen by accident. That's a result of the deep organizing that our chapter has done in Portland, where we've done a lot of Palestine DDS work, but we've also done a lot of labor work. And bringing those two things together, we've created the space for that to happen. And we also have 4 socialists in office now on city council, which is a nonpartisan seat. And so we are able to act as a party without being tied to the Democrats. And people see that, and they think we are a party. And we do also have socialists in office who are Democrats in the state legislature, but we're able to function as a party and move people along with us because we have elections, we have labor work, we have Palestine work. We're doing all of that each work together. I think you can't just do one. You can't just say one. You have to do all of it to bring all the people.
So I wanted to raise one question that I think is really important and ties political work and international work and work right at the workplace, and that is know your rights. That is, whether you have a boss who's with you or a boss who's against you, you can find a way of organizing. The best way is if you can do it as the union, but if it's in the break room at a break time or individually, this is really an important area, and it's one that really cuts across whether you're a Democrat or Republican. But it deals with both nationally, your neighbor, but also internationally, where you can talk about why did people happen to come here, So it's really something. There is material on Know Your Rights. There was a very good training at the EWOP conference last weekend. I tried to do something with the Detroit Labor Committee, a few months ago, but I think we need to do it over and over again, because not that workplace raids are going to be the main thing. The main thing, in my opinion, is the Trump team wants to terrorize people so that they will self-deport. And more people will self-deport if they are not, if they're alone. It happened before, and it will happen again. But we can stop this. The main way, it costs $17,000 on the average to deport one person. So giving them an airplane ticket home at $1,000 is much cheaper for them. And that's why they've got $1 million campaign going. I haven't seen the ads, but I understand the ads are on TV. And they're always talking about this. The main way that they want to get people is if they're coming in for some asylum hearing or office hearing. That's the main way. So the Los Angeles was just an attempt to terrorize people. But we can be ready by talking to our co-workers, and you know, it's amazing. Even if everybody that you work with is a citizen, they all know people who are in mixed status families, and it's just a tremendous way of organizing that's both political and very, very much connected to the workplace.
Thank you, Diane. Unfortunately, we've got to just go to the final closing thoughts from the panel, but I hope that these conversations can kind of continue as we go about the rest of the conference. But Shay, do you have any final thoughts or responses to the final round of questions?
No, just that it's really important comments on internationalism and ways that we should be bringing it up as possible. I'm really thankful our picket line sounded like the one Olivia was talking about, and I think that's what we need more picket lines to look like. And it's going to be DSA members and socialists and leftists who are going to make it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. The labor movement that we have now is not the labor movement that we would like to see. The labor movement currently is weak, we want one to be strong. And new organizing has a role to play in that, right? If we had a union that was called I Don't Have a Union, there'd be more workers in that union than anyone in any union in the United States combined, right? And so much of our work to make this movement stronger involves bringing in these people who are in motion, who are active, who have ideas about how this world and how their lives can be better, bring them into our movement, improving that movement, and then, you know, marching on the bus together. And that's the work that we're trying to do here.
Connor, final thoughts?
So we are going to strike again. I won't tell you when it is yet. It will be communicated when the time is right. And so the continued support, like I said, it's not only makes it possible, but it creates, you know, the workers feel the support in a way that makes them curious about the things that we all believe in. And so it's necessary to support labor organizing if we want to grow this organization. So I'll just say that.
And that reminded me of something that I wanted to say, which is, yeah, showing up can make a huge difference just in terms of people's openness to our ideas. I brought 2,000 nurses out on strike last summer, and there were socialists who came out to the strike and just wanted to hand out newspapers while nurses were like lifting heavy boxes. But the DSA people that came out were working the grill. Yeah. And that opened up so many positive conversations that we were then able to have. And I think that that is kind of the approach that I believe that the NLC is trying to bring, which is, you know, we're building the relationships first, and from there, I think the ideas flow very easily and organically. So
please don't give our people newspapers. They get enough shit from us already.